Hi everyone, welcome to Reflections. Today I wanted to talk about the three stages that we go through as humans that is also discussed in the Gene Keys by Richard Rudd. If you're interested in finding out more about the Gene Keys, do check out Richard Rudd's thegenekeys.com website. So he talks about the three stages that we go through as human beings: survival, service, and surrender. So as we know, when we're in survival mode, that usually means like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need to get the food that we eat, a warm place to stay, love, care, and concern from the relationships and the people that are around us, as well as meaning and purpose and a decent job in which to earn an income. But many people stay at what is known as this basic level of survival and operate in this survival level. The baseline emotion for this is fear. Some fear drives us to work hard and to keep us at the thrust of our existence and to keep us on the track so that we can continue to bring in what we need in order to survive and feed our families and keep those things going. So it drives us to work hard, and it can make us stay in jobs that we don't like, in loveless relationships, or even addictions. But the idea of survival, service, and surrender might be a new one, because for centuries, we've had this hierarchy of people who had and those that have not. And the ones that have not were convinced that they had to work the hours that they did in the factories, in the fields, in order to be able to even, feed their kids. So survival mentality is also, it's unconscious and conscious, and we only know life until we experience another perspective. So it's the conversations I've had with a few clients that when I was growing up, I grew up in the north of in the UK, in Manchester, and everyone around me lived a similar life. We were poor or working class. There weren't many single parents at the time, but I grew up in a family where it was a single parent household, and it was a constant state of survival and struggle, trying to work to get the money to buy the food so that we could all exist. But things like holidays, having a phone, even a fitted carpet was fairly unusual back then. So survival mentality is at the core sometimes of the culture in which we grow up in. It's only when we start to have new experiences that we start to see what's possible. And that's why many young people at schools are encouraged to go on trips to different places. Of course, a lot of families can't afford that, so that they can start to experience a different kind of life. So humans can actually stay in survival mode, and it's complicated by our perceptions and past experiences. So what I mean by that, if you've grown up in an environment where things were really difficult, and we have belief systems about you can make it if you try, or you have to work really hard to get what you've got, or that people from your background, culture, race, class, or gender can't do certain things, then these are the kind of things, and I'm not saying they're not true in some cases, that can actually impede our personal psychology and make it really difficult for us. So when I was growing up, the idea was that if you did survive school beyond 14, you might get a job working in a shop or a factory, because that was pretty traditional up north. And every area has its own industry in terms of how people think about what kind of work they can do when they go into the working environment. It was very unusual for people to go to university when I was growing up. I was the first one in the family, I think, to get an MA and, well, to go back to university, because I didn't leave at 18 with any, it was O levels back then, not A levels. So it's the way our experiences, our culture, and the mindset that we develop will determine, at least for a short while, what it is we think we can do and what we can access. So more and more people are becoming aware that these ideas, attitudes, and beliefs when we grow up can actually be really prevent us from moving forward and experiencing life in a very different way. It can also prevent us in the workplace, and maybe hinder us from going for promotions, thinking that we haven't got the strengths, the skills, or the capabilities in which to do that. I know that when I went back to college, that really made a difference to how I viewed myself and what I thought was possible. The other factor within this is that our ideas about ourselves that are formed within our family, the culture that we grow up in and the society that we're in, all these narratives often can be laid down and we're unconscious of many of them. And it's only when we start dating or doing something outside of the perceived norm that it can come to our attention what we either think we believe about something or those beliefs that can later trip us up because they can get in the way. And sometimes moving on from the identity of whatever has been created in as your role within that family can really feel quite challenging. And so I know growing up that a lot of people, left home and went to work in different places or even abroad. And that's when their experiences and ideas about who they were was changed. However, many of us don't even realize we're part of this wider social game in terms of who can access education, housing, finances, build their own businesses, and even make it in life. And certainly speaking as a woman growing up in my teens and in my 20s, the ideas about what I would have access to and what was capable of was massively impacted by the expectations of the teachers and who was around us. And sometimes we can absorb some of those ideas and beliefs about who we are until, like I said, we move on and do something different. So it's a usual process. We know in psychology that by the time you get to 7, most of your ideas about who you are have developed and formed. If you're having particular difficulties in school because you've got a learning need that that hasn't been met or even acknowledged, that can create even more difficulty than really, which is needless in many cases. And that will impact your perception about your capacity to learn and even what you're good at and not good at. Many of us know that if we have a relationship with a teacher and it's a really positive one, that can really influence whether we like that subject or not. So all of these things really do matter. By the time we get to our teen years, hopefully we've developed some good self-esteem and have realised some of what we are really good at. But it depends on the fit between you and the system in which you're trying to operate. So years ago when I was learning NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, we were looking at how these core beliefs and values and ideas about ourselves are formed and what can happen when we start to experience some difficulties or dissatisfaction. Because even though dissatisfaction and boredom are seen as a really negative thing, and people often perceive that as a depression or as a low mood, often that's our soul saying it's time for us to expand. We don't want to do the thing that we've been doing for X amount of time anymore, and we need to start considering what we're really passionate about or what it is we'd really like to try, whether that means that we're going to learn more things and try a completely different job. So the process in psychological terms, Carl Jung talks about is when we get to our teenage years, that's usually when we're forming a sense of what we like, don't like, what's important to us. I saw this phase quite often with year 10 students, which I think was about 14 to 15-year-old in the UK, that they may have formed ideas and beliefs and ideas about what they liked, what music they liked, what clothes they'd wear by the time they got to 14, 15 because of the peer group. And then they may start to question whether or not they really like those things. However, standing out from the crowd or your peer group can bring with heavy consequences. Peer groups often don't like the norm to be challenged. And often this is where bullying can take place. And people are quite quickly ousted from the group. And one of the things we know as human beings is many of us like to connect and we need to have friends and a social environment around us. Having fun and being out with friends and doing new things is really important. So the risk and reward can be too great to challenge the norms of the group. So often this can start to happen if people start to get the confidence when they're leaving school or going to university. But ideas about who we are and what we think we should do are still heavily influenced. And it really depends on your experience, whether you've garnered some help from a therapist or a coach or even a trusted teacher or a peer to help you really think through some of the decisions that you're making. And often, what happens in education and how well you do, people think that that really is going to decide the fate of the rest of their life. And actually, that couldn't be more untrue. Certainly now, as we're moving into the AI era, is we know that a lot of the things that we're learning in education aren't going to be as useful to us or society, or even work roles won't exist in which we can use those skills. So even for years, I remember when the calculator came out, and we all wondered why we were still adding up, or why we're now still trying to learn to spell when we've got spell check, although it's not that great, is it? So these advancements that are coming through thick and fast are really going to cause the system to really think about what is it that we are learning at school and why, and what skills do we need, and where is it we're heading in terms of our personal growth and the growth of our ideas about what we want. And what we want is heavily informed by what we watch, who we come into contact with, the material that we read. So we really need to make our experiences as wide and as vast as possible. So we can feel confused, dissatisfied, or bored at any period in our life, or we can go through several cycles of that. And cycles are important because just like when we form a new relationship, we can be anxious, but we can be really excited about the person that we're meeting and the impact that that relationship has on us. We can be excited about working really hard, saving up enough money, and buying our first car, just as we can be excited of going down the travel agents and booking a holiday. But what we know in psychology is that what feels really novel, exciting, and interesting only has a certain life shelf. So it means that we can really experience the range of emotions about that experience, but it will just pass through once we get used to the driving the car, or we've had the holiday and it becomes a memory, or we've been doing the job for a while. Often humans like to expand. Not all humans, some humans are happy doing the same thing day in, day out for a number of decades. But what we're seeing in terms of changes in the world, more people are looking for meaning and purpose now. And that also includes really finding out what lights you up, what brings you a sense of joy and excitement. Now, some of these emotions, like all emotions, are transient. So we can't really place our ideas and energies onto everything that exists outside of us. We need to do the internal work as well. So often it took decades before people were able to really sit back and say, what choices did I make in life? What went well? What do I regret? What am I happy with? And what aspects of life do I want to change? Do I want to move? Do I want to change job? Do I want to go into a new career? We often saw this. This is where midlife really came into effect. We saw this when people hit their 50s, their children had grown up, and they started really considering, what is it that I'm here for? What is meaning and purpose? And that can be a really tough time for people to go through as they really start to look philosophically at their lives and the choices that they've made and where they're going next. And there's nothing like a bit of uncertainty to start to rouse the feelings of anxiety and a sense of nothingness, or even worse, depression. And often these times are also taken as a negative, but actually can be extremely positive if we're able to go through those processes. And as I've said in other videos, sometimes with the help of somebody, we can start to see how vital it is for us to really start to reflect on where we are at our life phase and what we're looking at and where we want to go next. Of course, we know more psychology is used in more general terms now, and aspects of childhood that impacted our capacity to function will invariably get in the way as we get older. And certainly in terms of stress, that we know from the research that if anyone's had any difficulties from the age of 14, and they may experience stress and find it more difficult to cope with when life goes into uncharted territory. And one of the key things I've noticed really with a lot of people that I've worked with, they really struggle to be by themselves and spend time by themselves. And that's a real difficulty because if your work changes or your relationship fades or your friendships go through a transition, that can be really hard if you haven't got the internal resources to cope with those changes. And often we can go into quite an anxious or dark space. So again, reiterating, we have to develop the tools and the inner resilience in which to go through these, what can look like negative cycles in our lives. So the idea really of focusing on the self, being and reflecting is really synonymous with what it's like in therapy for a lot of people. And also can be a really useful tool for both extroverts and introverts. I know that during lockdown, what we saw was a lot of people who really didn't like spending time in the office, didn't want to socialize as much as other people around them, really started to realize that there was a sigh of release and less stress when they were able to really connect with their true nature of really liking a lot of time alone. So for the last decade, growth and opportunity to experience mindfulness and meditation and yoga has really introduced many of us to experience more of the emotions and the real things that we think and believe. It's usually when we're still and start to experience what is going on in our heads, the feelings that we feel, and even the grief, loss, and isolation and loneliness that can be activated. But if you stick at it, if you see this as temporary, if you see this as a transition that you're going through, you can really start to get to the gold nuggets or the city moments that Richard Rudd talks about in the Gene Keys. So what really helps is if we're able to learn these tools and techniques that facilitate us to have a sense of stillness, if we practice mindfulness, even just for a few moments each day in between, in between emails or calls, and we can really still down the environment, or even go to a class and experience a whole hour of just being by ourselves and doing some poses that release the resistance in the body and allow the body to start healing and enable us to have a really good sleep. We can start to allow some of the nuggets in our consciousness that is coming up for our attention that can help us reach for the next best step. And rather than seeing that as a negative experience, we can start to see the benefits of switching off and experience some of the more stiller moments, as Sadhguru talks about the elixir almost, or the beautiful juice that you come into contact with. Sometimes, though, just to be fair, we can experience really strong emotions when we're doing things like mindfulness and meditation and yoga. Because even in yin yoga, when you're holding those poses, the idea is that some of these traumas and difficult emotions are being held in the body. And we've not really been encouraged in our school days or even in our teen years to be able to connect with our bodies and process any of those difficult experiences that we've not been able to talk through with anybody or get affirmed and validated. And again, that's often the experience that people have in therapy. And that's why having someone to talk to in many cases can be really, really beneficial. Meanwhile, if we carry on doing what we do, we get what we've always got. That's one of the key sayings from NLP. If we're in a job that we don't like and we're really stressed, in a relationship and we're not tackling the issues that are arising, or in situations that are really causing us more distress, or having people around us that bring drama to our lives, if we ignore some of the signs in our body, which can be pain, aches, fatigue, not sleeping well, and even certain pains in the body, then we've then got to be careful because we can start to reach a state of crises. Too much stress in a drip effect ultimately has an impact on all of us, and it can lead to chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue, and affect so many different facets of who we are. Every one of us come here with a level of vulnerability in terms of what DNA, what cells sit within our DNA and what vulnerabilities were experienced by the family. And we need to be mindful that we can often prevent things from escalating. But again, it's about tapping into those tools. So I've learned this the hard way. I've had burnout twice, and the first time I experienced it was after it was just as I separated from my husband, and we'd had quite a lot of issues, really. Both my children have been really sick. One was in and out of hospital all the time, and my other boy was diagnosed with diabetes when he was 4 years old. And so life was fairly regimented as we had to monitor glucose levels and make sure that we struck that balance between diet, exercise, sleep, and just, trying to be a kid, really, growing up in the world. And sometimes over time, these various stresses can add up. And if we haven't had enough support or got enough sleep, got the right nutrition, as we know in research around well-being, it has its cost. So in 2001, I had my first real experience of burnout, and it was absolutely awful. I would get up and take the kids to school, and I was just in a chronic state of fatigue. I'd just finished a lot of my studies. My relationship had come to an end, and I was trying to manage all facets of life. So a lot of the work that I do with people really is to help prevent them from going down that road of ignoring the body and the signs that can be glaringly obvious to other people, but not to ourselves, especially if you've grown up in a house where things have been really difficult. And often people have beliefs that, if you take rest and time out, it's lazy, and we've carried these ideas about what we're now calling self-care, which is really about sleeping well and having the right nutrition and having time out, watching Netflix if we want, eating some ice cream if we want. We're kind of demonizing everything. And everything in moderation can be okay, unless, of course, you've got a particular diet and you need to be mindful of some of the things that you use. So that's when we're in a constant state of survival. But then what we can do, and many of us do, who've grown up in those circumstances and also grown up with trauma, go into professions which is about helping other people. So for those of you out there that are nurses, doctors, GPs, health visitors, teachers, therapists, coaches, there's something that drives people to help other people. And that's often because we don't want them to go down the hard road. We don't want them to make the same mistakes as we did, and we want them to have a better quality of life or even learn from our experiences. So that's the reason why I share some of the reflections with you. So life is an experience, but the way to experience joy and happiness really is to be able to release any of the stress and tension and perceived notions of who you think you are, especially if they're dragging you down. It's also about letting go of situation, places, and things that really are having an impact on your psyche and your well-being. Of course, we have friends who are going through difficult times every so often, and it's a transitionary issue. But if we've got too much of that, we're not getting the right support, then that will invariably have a huge impact. So one of the other key factors that really impacts people's mental health and well-being and their physical health is the internal judgment system that we apply. We can be really quite mean to ourselves. We can have an internal dialogue that calls us lazy or stupid, or why didn't we do this? Or we can regret things and we're not in the practice of celebrating our small successes and wins that we've made that are personal to us. For some people who've had depression for a while, getting out of bed is a success. Getting a shower and going down to the shop and buying some decent food is a success. For other people, success is when they've run a multi-million-pound business. This is personal to you, and comparing yourself with other people is not useful, because apparently we all have completely different fingerprints and DNA. So we've got strengths and gifts as well as things that we need to work through so that we can access and harness those. So we start to move out of survival and out of service into surrender. Surrender is when we go more into the flow of life. We're able to have work-life balance. We're moving out of burnout and pressure and challenge and negative self-talk, and we're breathing better. We're having mindful moments. We're spending time with family, and we're spending time alone. we're going to do more of the things that we enjoy, or at least have got those in the diary, as well as sticking to the commitments that we have with the people that are important in our life. And Western society really has created all sorts of things and myths to make us believe that, you know, carrying on like this is the way to go. But mental health is at its ultimate high. The amount of people that are on anti-anxiety and antidepressant meds is astonishing. And long term, being on medication is not good for you. Long term, learning some life skills and tools and getting the support that you need from wherever you can get that, even setting that up for yourself, as many parents do that have gone through some kind of loss. That's how grief circles were set up, because we all need that support at different times in our lives. So hopefully this has helped you understand that, you know, it's fairly normal for us to have these survival strategies, because they are really ingrained in our psyche, and it's been part of the system for millennia. And it's only now that we're starting to get out and really realize that maybe there is something else. Maybe we can live a different life. Maybe we can have a job that we enjoy. Maybe we don't have to be in an environment that is toxic or detrimental to our well-being. And maybe we can develop the confidence and the courage in which to sign up for a course or do something that challenges us, gets us out of our comfort zone, but at least starts to restore our faith in life. And faith and hope are so important, regardless of where you place your faith. We need hope to know that actually tomorrow can be a better day. After having burnt out twice in a serious car accident in 2019, where I thought that was it and my time here was done, I worked really hard to get out of the pain, out of the stiffness, and start to put things in place to really give me a sense of not just surviving, but actually moving towards thriving. And we want you to thrive. So leave me a comment in the comment section about the things that you do that support your well-being. And as a result of listening to this, hopefully one more thing that you can add to that: consistency is key. I'd rather people do 5 minutes of mindfulness and meditation every day, that they go for a walk for 10 minutes every day, that they take longer walks rather than the bus, that they have a better sleep, that they have a couple of quality relationships in their life, or join a meetup if they're isolated and alone because they've moved area, or even set up a support group, or access much of the free training out there, than to feel stuck and in struggle, because hopefully you'll be able to move forward with every little step that you take. So, you know, we're all basically ordinary people, and we're all searching for something, and we're designed to grow and expand. And we're also designed to experience life in a much better way than maybe we've ever thought possible. So let's hope we can utilize AI to clear out the unnecessary jobs that we don't want to do, so that we can create a lifestyle and a life that means we can experience much more fully joy, excitement, happiness, and just a general sense that existence can just be more than a drudgery that many of us find ourselves with. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe, and leave a comment in the comment section. Thank you.